So I want to talk to you about something today that is going to make some of you deeply uncomfortable. It's not anything gross or scary. It's not something that's complicated, but it revolves around caffeine. And I know what most people think, anyways, when this topic is brought up. You know, coffee, tea, pre-workouts, that energy drink that gets you through the afternoon, maybe even some dark chocolate you tell yourself is a healthy food. We'll unpack that at some other time. We're going to address all of those things, and we're talking about how it impacts our bodies. Now, full transparency, I do drink tea. You know, I'm not completely removed from this conversation myself. But I will say that understanding what caffeine is actually doing in the body has made me a lot more intentional about when I drink it, how much, and what I even pair it with. And what I've observed with working with people for years in this field, for a lot of people, especially men and women over the age of 50 who are dealing with chronic stiffness or some persistent tightness and a body that never quite feels it fully has let go. You know, caffeine is a piece of the puzzle that nobody is really examining. So let's examine it. Peace, love, light, and healing. I'm Nariah, the founder of City Biomechanics, and we help bridge the gap between healthcare and fitness. And today we're going somewhere that most fitness professionals never really think to go, and that's the connection between caffeine and how it impacts our entire body and the chronic tension your body may have learned to use over years, months, whatever, and how it's using that as protection now. And so let's get into it. What caffeine is actually doing to your body? What most people think of when they think of caffeine is as it's an energy source. It is not. Caffeine does not give you energy, folks. What it actually does is block the receptors in your brain that receive adenosine, and this is a chemical that accumulates throughout the day and tells your body that it's tired. And so caffeine doesn't fill the tank per se. You know, if anything, it covers the gauge. And so the tiredness, it never really leaves. It's still there, you know. And so the signal is just being intercepted now, which is fine. You know, we've got things to do. I get it. But here's the part that matters for this conversation. At the same time, caffeine is blocking the signal. It is also triggering the release of adrenaline. And adrenaline is a stress hormone. It's the same chemical that fires when your nervous system perceives a threat. So our heart rate starts to go up when adrenaline is pumped into the system. Blood pressure rises. Our breathing gets a little shallower. And so the body shifts into a mild but real version of its fight or flight state. And so every single morning before the commute, before the text messages, before the emails from your boss, before the news, before any actual stress even shows up for the day, the nervous system is already primed, it's already braced. And if you understand what the fascia does with that signal, this is where it really gets interesting. And so in terms of fascia, a quick reminder for anyone new here, because I talk about fascia a lot and I want to make sure we're all on the same page with this. So the fascia, real quick, the fascia is the continuous web of connective tissue that runs through the entirety, all the structure of our body. And so every joint, every organ, every nerve, it's not just a wrapping that encases our muscles. It's an active communication network, one that receives signals from the nervous system and transmits it throughout the entire body. And this influences how our tissues hold, how our joints position themselves, and what patterns you default to when you are moving. So I just wanted to clear that. So when the nervous system sends a stress signal, whether that be a real threat, emotional pressure, chemical because of caffeine, which triggers adrenaline, the fascia responds by contracting along the body's protective lines. And so that's why your chest will start to close up, your shoulders draw forward or higher. People clench their jaws or have tight hip flexors. And so the quick key question for me is if all of these things are happening before the day even starts, from the morning coffee, the pre-workout, the energy drink, the tea, and then the actual stresses of the day arrive on top of the prime state, and then another dose of caffeine through the mid-morning, and possibly another one in the early afternoon because the slump is real, right? When exactly is the fascia getting a clean window to release or to rest? The answer for a lot of people is never. I see this all the time in my clinic. It's never. Or at least not long enough for it to matter anyways. And when that pattern repeats for months, for years, something more significant begins to happen. Chronic tension is learned through protection. Chronic tension is learned through protection. And so this is a concept I really want you to sit with today. To simplify this, basically the nervous system, it learns. Your nervous system learns. So when the body is repeatedly placed in a state of low grade stress activation through caffeine, through life stress, through poor sleep, through a combination of inputs that keep the threat response running, the nervous system eventually stops treating that state as temporary and it starts treating it as normal. And the fascia follows right after that. Tissue that has been held in a contracted protective position long enough begins to structurally adapt to that position. So it thickens, it dehydrates, it loses its fluid mobility that allows it to glide and respond freely. And here's where it gets circular in a way that is important to really understand, in my opinion. The sensory receptors that are embedded in the fascia, the ones that's feeding the information to the brain about where you are in space, how safe you are, and what your body is capable of, those receptors are now firing from a compressed, restricted environment. So the signals they send noise to the body. It's very noisy, or incomplete. It doesn't paint a clear picture for the brain. And so then the brain receives that poor picture. And you know what it does? It starts to put us in protective measure. It increases the tension surrounding in its tissues. It raises the sensitivity of the pain response. And so it starts to brace harder. So lower back issues, I'm not going to get into all the list of chronic pain. And so this is not the body failing. This is the body doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is protecting the areas where it does not have reliable information. The problem is that the protection has now become the default. And so the neck that is always tight, the shoulders that never really drop, the jaw that is clenched before you even really notice it, the body that never quits exhaling, even on Saturday morning where there's nowhere to be and nothing to do. It's hard for people to relax, and so they always saying they're tired. That is chronic tension as a learned protection. And your daily caffeine intake, whether it's coffee, tea, energy drinks, pre-workout, or all the above, is one of the inputs keeping that pattern alive. And so most people aren't familiar with the half-life. And so what I mean by that is, fun fact is that going, and you look into your afternoon, then most people, they'll take an energy drink and they don't know any differently. But what they don't realize is that caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 7 hours. That means that the coffee you had at 7 in the morning The pre-workout you had before your 9 o'clock session, your workout session, the tea you sipped at 10, half of that caffeine is still active in your system by noon. And so you stack, most people, they'll stack on top of that in the early afternoon, and then they have a compounding adrenaline effect well into the evening. And if you go and grab an energy drink at 2 o'clock, which a lot of people do because the afternoon slump is real, that caffeine is circulating at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock. Now here is why that matters specifically for people over 50. Your liver metabolism slows down as we age, which means caffeine is cleared from the system. It's harder to clear the caffeine from the system because you're not in your 20s anymore. And so you have that adrenaline still activated further along through your day. And so sleep, which is already commonly disrupted in this age demographic, for a whole lot of people, this is what they don't realize is that is where sleep is where your rehydration, your tissue repair, your nervous system restoration all happen. So if caffeine is still running the stress as a hormone stress response at 9, then your sleep is going to be compromised because your body never fully exited that activated state before. Um, and so you run it right into the next day. And so you can see where this leads. The fascia never gets what it needs. The pattern reinforces. The tension becomes the new normal. And so all of those things run the risk of you having chronic pain. Now I want to be clear about something because I'm not sitting here telling you that caffeine is the enemy. I don't consume that much of it myself, but I'm also not going to tell you that you shouldn't consume it. You're grown. Um, but my job is to let you know what the research says. And so the research on caffeine is that it's genuinely mixed. First off, there are real benefits in terms of cognitive function, certain aspects of physical performance, and other things. And so this is not a detox pitch, and I'm not here to sell you caffeine-free lifestyle. What I am saying is this: the body is a system. And every input going into that system, coffee, tea, energy drinks, pre-workout, whatever your particular source is, either supports the outcome you are working towards or quietly working against them. All right? So if you're training consistently and not recovering the way you should, if the same areas that stay tight, no matter how much you stretch them, if your body never quite feels like it fully let go, it's worth looking at the full picture is all I'm saying. And so it's not just about the workout, it's not just about the diet, but the nervous system, the fascia, the daily habits that are either keeping the system in a state of activation or giving it a space to restore. And so from a scientific and holistic standpoint, these things are not separate conversations. These are the same conversations. So the caffeine that primes the nervous system before breakfast, the stress that layers on top of that, the fascia that encodes the accumulated tension, the brain starts to learn to protect what the fascia is bracing. So the training that's happening inside the system is already managing more than most people even realize. And so everything is interconnected, guys. And so a few practical things worth experimenting with, not just, as rules, but just as some observations is, delaying your first caffeine intake 60 to 90 minutes after waking up, whatever form that takes for you, allow the body to naturally, those natural cortisol levels to peak, and settle before you just add adrenaline on top of the caffeine, and so, because you're just stacking that stimulation on top of stimulation otherwise. Also, giving the system a cutoff time early enough that the half-life that I talked about earlier, it clears before you sleep. And so you can protect that sleep window so you can go into the evening with enough melatonin and things of that nature, and you're not in a state of fight or flight while you're trying to sleep. And most importantly, hydrating. Hydration matters. Caffeine is a diuretic regardless of the source. And so fascia requires hydration to maintain its mobility and its signal clarity. And so a lot of people aren't drinking enough water and to begin with, and particularly get some electrolytes in those water too, you know. But the bottom line is that the body that you bring to training or just everyday life is not a blank slate. It is a system that has been receiving input since the moment it woke up, since the first hit of caffeine, since the first stress signal of the morning. The fascia has been responding. And so the nervous system has been tracking what you've been putting into it. And so the brain has been building its picture of what is safe and what needs protecting. And so, yes, training matters, movement matters, strength and mobility, all of it, all of those things matter deeply. But so does understanding the full system that those things are happening inside of. And so that is what we do at Iron City Biomechanics. We look at the whole picture. We bridge the gap between what healthcare examines and what fitness addresses, and we work in the spaces between them where the real answers usually live. And so if this opened up a question for you and that you haven't thought to ask before, or you recognize your own body is somewhere in what I described today, I want you I invite you to take the next step to schedule a movement diagnosis with one of our fitness practitioners at Iron City Biomechanics, where we look at how you move, how you stand, how your nervous system and fascia are showing up in your body, and what is actually going on in your system beneath the surface. So this isn't we don't come up with like generic plans for our clients. We come up with them individualized picture, if you will. And so the link is in the bio. We are here, we're right here in Vestavia Hills, Alabama, and we work with men and women who are already just understand their bodies more than just, the fitness, the physical components of things. So I'm Naraya again, gratitude for watching to the end. And whatever your caffeine of choice is, maybe chase it with a glass of water. Peace, love, light, and healing.